Let me start off with sort of a broad question, Susie. What's your state of mind sort of going into this? This is a big, big season for F1 Academy. I would dare say for the sport overall. So how are you feeling? What's the vibe?
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a really big pleasure to be here. I've got a little test for the audience that can give me a good insight. How many of you know what F1 Academy is?
Wow.
That's quite a few hands. We're off to a flying start. No, it's a really, really big weekend for us and such an honor to open our season here in Jeddah. It's obviously quite iconic because we're opening our season. We are a female race championship for all of you that don't know what F1 Academy is, that's trying to nurture talent. But I think to open here in a country where just 6 years ago women couldn't drive, that really shows incredible progress. We also have a Saudi Arabian female driver on the grid this weekend in our wild card. And sometimes in life, you have to see it to believe it. And we are out there to show that this sport wants to provide opportunity to women and wants to make the sport more diverse in the long term. We also have International Women's Day tomorrow. So really, it's a perfect platform for us to get started.
And so, Zach, you come into this weekend with your own hopes and dreams, week 2 of the season. How are you feeling? I mean, last season was a really interesting one. Started off, pun intended, sort of slow and then really accelerated. How are you feeling coming in now? What's the state of mind for you and the team?
Well, first of all, good afternoon, everyone. We're very excited. We had a good first race of the year in Bahrain, both cars comfortably in the points. As you mentioned, this time last year, was a pretty dreadful start, but all the men and women at McLaren did an awesome job the second half of the year to give us a very fast race car, and I think we've picked up where we've left off. So, it'll take a couple races to see where everyone settles in because all these tracks are a little bit different the first couple races of the year, but feel like we're definitely in a much better starting point. We're participating with the F1 Academy with Bianca. We're very excited for our first 2 races of the year, and in fact, it's our second female racing driver.
Right.
We joined Extreme E a couple years ago, where you have a male and female racing drivers, so we're quite proud to have 2 excellent female racing drivers on our payroll, if you'd like, and so excited to get on with that activity. And we have an IndyCar team, which the start of the season is happening this weekend, so
right.
We're going to have lots of racing going on.
Yeah, and so let's talk about this place if we can for a second. You mentioned, Susie, sort of the importance of everything that's going on. What's the importance of this market, this region, for the overall sort of motorsports culture? A lot has been invested by Saudi Arabia, and simultaneously, a lot is being invested by F1 and the FIA here. Why? Like, what's the business case?
Well, I think for me, the word that stands out is really progress, because there's been so much change. And even for me, the last time I was here was with Formula E when we were in Riyadh, and the country is developing at such an incredible rate. And when we looked last year about obviously joining F1 Academy, joining Formula One and only racing with Formula One, it was quite a challenge to figure out, okay, how are we going to put our calendar together? Because there's obviously Formula 2, there's Formula 3, there's Porsche. But it was actually the reception that we got from our friends in Saudi who said, we absolutely want Formula One Academy to open their season with us. We want to put on lots of activities under the Discover Your Drive banner where we can engage with the next generation, inspire the next generation, get a female Saudi driver on the grid. So it was really an alignment where the promoter here wanted to really showcase what was possible within the world of motorsport. And for us, it's the perfect platform to really be quite bold, which is what we want to be, disruptive and bold, and to say, you know what, we're an all-female championship that's going to open in Saudi Arabia. I think it doesn't get more bold than that.
Yeah. And in terms of picking up on that exact point, sort of the disruption in this sport, Zach, some of it has been geographic. And as the calendar has sort of shifted over the years, we start the season now with 2 races in this region. You and I have talked over the years over the past couple of years about the importance of the United States, thinking back home. How do you see that developing in terms of what is the right geographic mix? Is it close to right now? What makes sense for you as a CEO to really grow this business as you think about the calendar?
Yeah, I think from a calendar standpoint, we're maxed out on the amount of races we can have on an annual basis. 24, I think, is absolutely the limit. I'd like to see us get into some rotational races because we have a lot more demand, and I think we want to fill that demand. We want to continue to grow the sport, but I don't think you can do that by going to 28 races. I think maybe you lock in 20 permanent races, and then you have 8 that rotate, so you race 24 times a year, but you're in 28 markets. I think the calendar now, I think everything that's gone on in the Middle East around Formula One and sport has been absolutely awesome. It's a very young generation, and it's a very emerging market. It's a very vibrant country and territory. I think a lot of e-commerce, I know from our partners, are very interested in doing further business in the Middle East and Saudi as it continues to develop. I think sport's a great way to bring people together from around the world. I think we're in a great place in North America now with 3 races in the United States. And then, of course, we've got Montreal, Mexico, and Brazil. So I think from an America standpoint, Europe, of course, is the home of Formula One. I think if we needed to dial up a few more races, I'd say Asia is an important territory, especially when COVID hit, we're going back to China for the first time, I think, in 4 years. So I think if we had 4 more markets to go into, I'd love it to be another race in Asia and India, maybe a South Africa. And then that would kind of really give us the global footprint. But I think the sport's in a great spot. We have more new fans. We have more female fans. We have younger fans, a lot of new fans to the sport. So I think we need to keep doing what we're doing is the right way forward.
Yeah. And so, Susie, you talked about the choice to open the season for F1 Academy here. How does the rest of the season look, and how do you go about picking those races? Because those are candidly, I think, from the outside, critical strategic decisions for growing audience, growing the brands of the drivers, growing the brands of the academy. So walk us through that process, because I dare say you've come into this with a very aggressive and ambitious business plan, I think.
Well, we had to be aggressive to make it work, but I think one of the big challenges we face is that participation of women in motorsport has never gone above 5%. That means I'm struggling with a very small pool of women that are actually competing in the sport, which means I'm not in the luxurious position of simply existing and racing year after year. There's a huge part of the F1 Academy strategy that has to be inspiring the next generation. And I don't think we exist just to find female racing drivers or find a female that will make it to Formula One. We want to open the sport as a whole. We want to provide accessibility, provide opportunity, and inspire the next generation to see that this isn't a male-dominated environment anymore. So how are we going to reach the next generation? We need to make sure we're racing in the right places, like you've said, and I'm very proud that in our first year, we're hitting 3 continents.
Right.
We're opening here in Saudi, we head over to Miami, we come back to Europe, we go to Singapore, and then we finish in the Middle East again. So really important to make sure we're touching all the different regions, that women around the world can see what we're doing, not just within Europe or, let's say, the US and Europe. And the broadcast partners are a really important part of our strategy. We need to be seen. If you were to visit our Formula One Academy paddock here, we're on the back of the main grandstand, right next to the fan zone area. It's a huge privilege to get into the Formula One paddock, but it's very difficult to get one of those passes. We want to be open and accessible. Everyone can come and see our cars. And for those coming, to see a 21-year-old zipping up a Ferrari race suit and getting into what looks like a miniature Ferrari Formula One car, that's the message we want to deliver, that it is possible, because sometimes in life, if you can see it, you can believe it. And now we hope that you just won't miss us.
Right.
We're hoping to be, really bold and be seen by all of those fans. Like Zach said, we have such a wide female fan base in Formula One now. The fastest growing demographic is the 18 to 24-year-old female. And we need to make sure that those fans see that this is a sport which is accessible and inclusive.
So, Zach, Susie talked about sort of the pool that she's fishing in from a driver's perspective. That gives me at least an excuse to talk about drivers in Formula One. You have the, I would say, pretty admirable and enviable position of having a pretty stable paddock or garage right now. What's going on and sort of how do you sort of maintain that stability and that focus amid everything that went on in the off season in terms of folks moving around?
Yeah, I think, in Formula One, there's only 20 Grand Prix drivers. So unlike other sports where you have hundreds, it's a small group of drivers that are at the very top of their game. And, it's exciting. I think, anytime you get kind of trades or drivers moving around is exciting for the sport. When I started at McLaren, I very much kind of my dream, if you like, was to have driver stability and team stability, and that's easier said than done. We're fortunate Lando's been with us from day one and is very much a part of the team, and Oscar, is on his way, right? He's in his second year with us. So I think in order to win world championships, the first thing you need on a long list of things that you need are two great Grand Prix drivers. So that's always been a big focus. That's an area that I enjoy contributing to the team. Working with drivers, finding drivers. Having once raced, I feel that's an area where I can contribute much more so than on the aerodynamics or any technical contribution to the team. I'm torn on Lewis because he's been with Mercedes his entire career. Because when he was with us, we were Mercedes, and I think there's something romantic about an athlete staying with a single brand their entire career. That kind of is what used to happen in the good old days, but now we see drivers, players, whatever sport they're in, moving around. Obviously, Ferrari's very iconic, so the excitement of seeing the most successful Grand Prix driver of all time with the most famous Formula One team of all time, I think from a fan perspective is an exciting proposition, but it also gives room for new talent to come in. Mercedes in particular has the next, if you like, Lando, Oscar Piastri driver coming up through the ranks, and drivers do move on, and that creates opportunities for the next Lewis Hamilton to come along. So I think it's all good. Create some excitement, and now we know what we'll be watching some of on Netflix next week.
Right, that's exactly right. And Susie, when it comes to drivers, and sort of looking to the future, it begs the obvious question, I think, and I'm guessing a lot of people in this audience have it. Will we see a female driver of those 20, and when?
Well, I think we don't exist just to find a female Formula One driver. It would be a great byproduct from the platform that we've created. Mm-hmm. I do think we have some outstanding talent in the field this year. Unfortunately for me, it looks like let's say the fastest drivers with Mercedes, which is for sure going to raise some eyebrows. But in the end, we're trying to create a platform where we can find the talent and really give them the springboard to go on and progress in the sport. This is one of the few sports in the world, alongside sailing and horse riding or jumping, that isn't segregated. And in my opinion, having driven a Formula One car, having done a race distance in a Formula One car, there's no reason why women can't compete in Formula One. I think it just comes down to the numbers. We need to get more participating. We need to help them on the journey up the ladder. And we need to hope that one is talented enough to make it to the very top. And I for sure don't believe that a woman needs to get opportunity just because she's a woman. We are out there to find the most talented. The Formula One grid is the best 20 racing drivers in the world. It's the pinnacle of the sport. You need to be good enough, and you need to deserve your place on that grid. And it's up to us to try and unearth all of this talent, this female talent, and make sure that they have the possibility to progress up the sport. And I think it would be a great story to see a woman in Formula One. I wouldn't want to just see her on the grid. I would want to see her racing competitively. But I think it's something, even the idea of it excites me, and that's for sure one of our goals at F1 Academy.
You think it'll happen, Zach?
I definitely think it'll happen, and I think kind of building on what Susie said, and I think this is what the F1 Academy is doing, and we have a lot of initiatives at McLaren, like 60 Scholars, where we took 60 females around STEM, age 18 to 23, to give them an opportunity to be involved in McLaren in more of an engineering STEM capacity. I think what we need to do, which is what we're doing, is we need to raise awareness, because for every Lando Norris or Lewis Hamilton, there's thousands of drivers that wanted to be Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton. And as you come up the tree, it's just very, very, very difficult. So what we need to do, which I believe we're doing right now, is creating awareness, excitement, showing people that there's a path to get involved in Formula One, whether it's a racing driver or an engineer or a mechanic, whatever the case may be. I think esports plays a big role. You know, when I was growing up, it was video games and there was no authenticity to what it was really like. Now esports, you know, the simulators are very authentic, and motorsports has a disadvantage compared to maybe some stick and ball sports, where in school, you know, you get a football or a baseball or tennis racket, and it's pretty inexpensive to play on the playground. Now that we have esports, that's kind of our inexpensive way to put a steering wheel in the hands of young men and women around the world to let them see what it's like to be a racing driver. So I think it starts at the most grassroots level. We need tens of thousands of people participating in whatever gets them excited about motorsports. We then need to show everyone there is a path to get to Formula One, whether it's in the racing seat or back at the factory or on the pit crew. It's going to be a journey to get there, but I think we're taking the necessary steps to show we're a very inclusive sport. There's plenty of opportunity, but we need volume of activity, because whether you're a top-line engineer or driver, very few make it to the top. So you need a volume of activity at the grassroots level, and I think that's what we're all collectively doing, is starting to provide these opportunities.
And when it comes to opportunity, you know, Susie, it does feel like we are at a fascinating and catalytic moment for women in sports, not just in your sport, but if we think about what's happening, especially in football in England, more broadly in Europe, certainly in the United States, more investment coming. Why do you think that is? I mean, is it just it was a matter of time, or has there been something that has catalyzed that in your mind, that you know, media rights are now starting to come in, new sponsors are coming in? What happened to candidly make that finally occur?
It's been super interesting for me to follow the growth of women's sport outside of motorsport, because I think the world changed. The world changed. There was a huge movement a few years ago that really tried to express more equality for women. Women wanted to stand up and have more, let's say, power at the table. And I think that started a movement where a lot of sports said, okay, we're missing out on a huge part of the audience, our potential audience. And I think women have also seen that there's a lot more opportunity in sport than there once was, particularly in male-dominated sports. Now you have most football teams having a women's football team.
Right.
And that is a huge, I think, value addition to the teams. If you look at F1 Academy, I think I'm in a hugely luxurious position, because if you'd asked me 18 months ago, is your ambition to run a race series? Definitely not. But when I sat down with the management of Formula One and of Liberty, and I saw their ambition to actually put their money where their mouth was and do something to provide more diversity in what is seen as a very male-dominated sport, I realized it's once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to create positive, impactful change in this sport. And when I joined, I went to meet all of the team principals and very much said, please don't look at me as a woman running a women's thing. This is for the greater good of our sport. I believe we can bring positive, impactful change, but I need all of you on the journey with me. And true to their word, all 10 F1 teams came to support F1 Academy, and that was a monumental moment for us as F1 Academy. The Formula One teams, as a united group, have never given their name and their liveries to anything outside of Formula One before. So I think that was something that was hugely important for our success, but also hugely important to show that this sport as a whole, we want to create positive, impactful change. And I certainly believe, aside from the sporting factor, we can add value to Formula One. We can build ourselves up to being a platform which is actually financially sustainable and become a value addition. And I've got to obviously prove to all of the Formula One teams that their investment will bring ROI, that it's a reason that not only are we doing something good, but for all of their commercial partners,
right,
we're providing a platform that's positive. And we obviously got quite a lot of attention quite recently. We brought a female cosmetics brand, Charlotte Tilbury, into Formula One Academy, the first time a makeup brand has ever come into the world of motorsport. And I think we can go out and try and look for those partnerships and those brands that speak to the next generation, to a new audience of fans that weren't really maybe aware of motorsport before. And that for us, like what Zach said, is so important. We need to raise the awareness. We need to be out there, and people need to hear about us and understand what's possible.
Well, I mean, I think it's fair to say that if there are very, very few things, I think you can back this up, that all 10 teams agree on, but one of them is making more money. I mean, that sounds good. Speaking of agreement, as we start to wrap up, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about expansion of the grid, which obviously you and I talked about this last fall in Bloomberg. Initial sign-off for Andretti to come in from an FIA perspective. F1 ultimately knocks that down. What do you think happens next by way of expansion, if anything?
I think, Formula One, under Liberty's ownership, has become extremely valuable. You now have 10 teams. Half the grid is profitable. They weren't 5 years ago. I think you saw teams selling for as little as, I believe Williams was around 150 million. Racing Point, which was Force India, out of administration. McLaren had its own challenges. Now I think every team is worth well north of £1 billion. That is tremendous what Liberty's done in the way they've reconstructed the sport to create that much value. And so I think the general view is we have a very healthy sport. Let's make sure if there's other teams that come in, that they're additive, they're growing TV ratings, they're growing sponsorship, they're growing the pie. I think it was unfortunate to see the kind of lack of alignment, if you'd like, between the FIA and Formula One. That's something that I think the two custodians of the sport, I think, need to work more hand in hand on a variety of decisions, because we're dependent upon those two entities working closely together and to align. So I think the way that 11th team was handled was less than ideal from a sporting point of view. I think continuing to grow the media in the sport, continuing to grow the calendar in markets is important. And there's always a team, even though everyone says they're not up for sale, at some point someone will be.
Everyone's for sale at the right price, Zach. Come on.
Apparently so. Probably actually not the case with the majority of the grid, but I think there is. And so I think what Liberty is wanting to do is protect the value of the 10 teams that exist. So it's great we're now in a position where pre-Liberty you had teams falling away. Now, post-Liberty era, there's teams lining up that want to get into the sport. So I think Liberty is just, kind of seeing how they want to have, how, when, and if they want new teams to enter. But I just think it talks to the health of our sport.